stage.
Hello. Let's get my multitude of tech working. Right. Up and there. Right. Are we working? Yes, we're working. Cool. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see people who I've not seen for 4 years. Yeah, I missed you all. Hi. So today I am going to talk to you about curating a platform experience, which is slightly different to creating a platform experience. As Gwen says, my name is Andy. I work a lot with Kubernetes, so this is me in Kubernetes form, for those of you that are familiar with YAML. I spend most of my day building and running Kubernetes clusters, but also providing what we call a customer experience, which could also be called DevRel, Dev Advocate, and a number of other words. And I use all those phrases interchangeably throughout this talk. I work for Flutter, who are now the owners of Skybet and Gaming, where this talk starts. I work as principal platform engineer with Kubernetes. And outside of the day job, I run a conference in London, I play guitar terribly, and I may indeed one day run another Leeds DevOps meetup. Watch this space, who knows? Okay. So this talk was intended not for a bunch of people who do testing all day. It was intended for a bunch of people that run platforms all day, particularly ops people. So I realise there's probably not a great number of people in the crowd today that run Kubernetes clusters for a living. But I think some of the things I'm going to talk about are transferable, particularly if you work with other teams where you are consuming or sharing services. So this is kind of overlapping a bit with Chris's talk. And what I want you to take away from today is not the nitty-gritty of what I did specific to Kubernetes, but the techniques you could use for yourself to make working with other teams better. And that was really the objective of this. Okay, so let's start. Let's start at the beginning. A very good place to start, at least according to The Sound of Music, which I'm sure you're all fans of. And in the beginning, there was an out. And then there was a flash, a huge bang, and then there were stars, planets, dinosaurs, Vikings, trousers, and eventually servers. Now, I've skipped a few bits of the detail there for brevity, but I'm going to start with servers. And we have servers, and we like servers because we can put them in data centers, and we can plug in wires, and we give them power, we give them cooling, we give them network connectivity, and that's great because we can start running our applications on them. So that's great, we've got things running on servers. We then think, actually, we could do this more efficiently if we didn't run on real servers. Instead, we ran on pretend servers that run on real servers. And we can be much more efficient with these pretend servers. And as somebody said, well, don't run these pretend servers on your own data center. Run them in ours. We've got one, and it's definitely much cheaper. And we did that. We run things in the cloud, and that's all great. And then the techies said, have you seen these things called containers? What we can do is we can wrap your code in a little bundle of files, and we can start it really quickly, and like run loads of them really quickly, and then scale them down really quickly. So if you've got like elastic workloads for like web scale stuff, these are ace. And everyone said, sounds great. How do we do it? And they said, well, you do need a couple of years of sysadmin experience and understand kernel flags and things and command line foo. And everyone went, oh, that's great. But then somebody went Docker and said, well, we'll do all that for you. So we've got containers now. So we've gone through this whole evolution from the Big Bang through to having Docker. And this was kind of 2016 at Skybet and Gaming. The Bet Tribe are looking to how to leverage running containers at scale. Traditionally, they've worked with virtual machines and data centers and cloud technologies. But the actual kickoff document that's here for what became the Kubernetes cluster is actually more of a business thing. You'll see in the middle, the vision statement is outside of the squad, there should be no humans involved in the value stream between feature and customer. So very much, again, overlapping with Chris's stuff about delivering value. So a team was put together to evaluate the different container hosting technologies. MVPs were done, working with an actual customer as well, working with the team that wanted to host a product on it. And behold, we had Kubernetes, which was a very good choice, and I'm glad they chose that. So alongside this cluster, there's a team called Bet Platform Engineering, because this is in the Bet Tribe, this is 2016, and it goes really well, it takes off. We get loads and loads of customers all wanting to use our stuff. When I'm referring to a customer in this context, I'm referring to like development teams cross-functional teams developing things to run on the platform. And it's going great, and then more people come along. And okay, we're being a little bit of a victim of our own success at this point. So we make the team bigger. Happy days, this is 2018. We're now moved to infrastructure. We're called Infrastructure Platform Engineering. Everything's going smoothly, except inside it wasn't. So although we got lots of customers using our stuff, internally we were suffering from growing pains. Our processes weren't scaling, our ways of working weren't really scaling either. We had to change some stuff. So we decided what we would do is we would restructure the team into 3 different sub-teams. So it's still one squad. But inside of that squad now, we've got the engine team who look after the Kubernetes stuff, so keep it running, patch it, make it better, add features. We've got the capabilities team who are automating things. This idea of not having interactions with anyone outside of the squad to deliver stuff is where the automation team come in. They do automation around load balancers, firewalls, DNS, certificates, and a whole bunch of other stuff so that teams don't have to go and raise tickets to get stuff they need to run their app. The automation can do that for them. And then there's the experiment, the customer experience team, and that's where I come in. So I'm joined in the team by Lydia, who's on our grad scheme, brand new grad, and Howard, who's been with the team for a couple of years. And we are basically told we are an experiment to see whether this customer experience works. Nobody else is doing this. We're allowed to do as much work on customer experience or work on the platform with the engine team if we want to. We're kind of given a free rein, which is great, but it also means we have to work out what to do. So, where do we start? Let's measure things. That's what we do in the DevOps principles. We work out what reality looks like so that we can compare and work out whether we're progressing. Had we seen Chris's talk in 2018, we probably have done things a little different, but instead we set off down this path. And we start by sending out a survey to work out what the current state of things is. And we get a return rate of about 31 responses, which was 500 techies in the organisation. That's 6%. We wanted 5. We're happy with that. And bear in mind, not everybody's using our cluster at this point. So we've got some responses to this survey. The survey itself is based around which team do you work in. We made it anonymous because we want people to be honest. We ask which clusters do you use, which features do you use, and then we have these usability statements, which are really important. So on the cluster, I find using feature X easy. Do you strongly disagree? Disagree, agree, strongly agree. And there's about 9 of these. In hindsight, 1 or 2 of them are a bit leading, and I would have done them different now, but we're going to use those as metrics to measure. Now, I'm not going to go through the metrics right now. I will do because I'm going to show them year on year. But they're pretty good when they come back. The majority of stuff is positive, and the actual written feedback we get in the free-form areas we've got about what are we doing well, how can we improve, are quite gushingly embarrassing at times, to be quite honest. But there is some constructive feedback in some of the responses that says your onboarding's really hard and your documentation's a mess, which we kind of knew already. So we've got some areas to work at, and we've got a baseline now of what we can do. So we move into July 2019. This is our first season as a team. And what we're going to do now is, rather than dive into the work, we did something super smart, and this made a massive difference. We worked out what the hell we were there to do, what our true north was, what our point of being a team was. So the words are a little bit woolly. We talk about engaging with our customers, empowering our customers, and supporting our customers. And we could have turned the language a little bit more practical, but we stick with that because that's what we're doing. As you can see, I've completely misunderstood the purposes of an OKR template because I didn't know what they were at the time, and I just copied something I found and filled it in with our stuff. But this was super useful because anything we were doing as an experience team that didn't relate to that, we shouldn't be doing. Okay, so we've now got a direction, a raison d'etre, as it were. And then the next thing we do is we start trying to work out who the heck are our customers? Who are these developers? We know some of them. They wander up to our desks and have conversations with us and ask us questions. At Skybet, we had and still have a chatbot system for raising help requests. So you don't go and raise a help ticket. You go into a chat channel, say, I need help, and people dive on, hopefully, and respond to you with the answers you need, and then you finish that help request. Behind the scenes, though, a ticket in Jira is created, and it fills it in with all the transcripts. So as somebody raising a help request, you never go into Jira, you don't see that. That's created for you. But what this means is we've got months worth of flipping tickets with like support requests on, and we can go and mine those. And first of all, we can generate an actual FAQ document because these are frequently asked questions, which should help reduce support queries and reduce toil. So that's a good win. The second thing is we've got a list of names. We know who people are raising help tickets. These are clearly our customers. And a little bit more investigative work on our documentation stacks, find some org charts. And as a very primitive form of CRM, we printed these org charts off and sort of marking on where the help requests were coming from. And we were already doing training at this point. We've been doing that for kind of like a year or two before the experience team. So we could mark on who's had training, and suddenly we've got this kind of map of where the requests were coming from and actually who needed more help. So we could target our training at people who were raising requests. And from a marketing and adoption perspective as well, we can see areas of the company that aren't using our stuff, and maybe we could give them the training and then they might start using it. So this is super clever and super powerful. And we kept it up to date as we went through this stuff, like a progress check. Next thing we've got to do is actually go and talk to the people. Now, as techies, this is kind of foreign. I don't think as techies we're particularly good at doing meetings. I think we're very good at our ceremonies. We all know how to do a stand-up. Boy, do we know how to do a stand-up. Yeah. We all know how to do planning. We all know what those planning poker cards are for and what a 3 means. Oh, we've got opinions about that. And we have all got opinions on retros, depending how kooky your delivery manager is as to what that format follows. But actually doing normal meetings, we're not very good at it. And I'm not saying we go kind of like full Handforth Parish Council protocol on meetings, but we don't really like have people that have jobs. We don't have like chairs, and we don't have scribes, and we don't keep minutes very well. We just kind of turn up, things are said, and if everybody remembers to do stuff, things happen. In this, we want to write down, we create a meeting with each of the tribes, so 4 of the tribes, 4 meetings a month, same place, same time, when we could do things, when we could go at the same place, obviously moved online. And the regular, the open door policy, anyone can come, don't care if you work in the tribe or not, anyone can come along to these meetings. We follow a set format. We have updates from the previous meeting, or updates and actions from previous meetings, updates from IPE, from our team. These are features coming out, these are things we've done with the cluster, these are things you need to know about, and feedback from the people in the room. What do you need help with? What's working? What's not? What work have you got coming up? What do we need to know about? And we draw up actions on the end. And we write all this down and make it publicly available. So we minute the whole flipping thing with action points and tag everybody's name in that. So who said what, who's got things to do. And we make those minutes publicly available. A couple of main reasons for that. Number one, we're an experiment. We want our boss to be able to see what we're doing. So there is a kind of like a justification of that. Secondly, if people haven't been at the meeting, they can see what was spoken about. And thirdly, if they were at the meeting, they can see what they're meant to follow up and do and what they said. So we do all this in the open. Anyone can look at these meetings, any squad, any tribe, open door policy. Then we've got some other things to do. We start these meetings, we're getting feedback. We've got some stuff to do roadmap. We know our onboarding's a bit complicated, to say the least. So we put some automation around that. That's not solved the problem, but it's a step in the right direction. We've got ownership, and this is probably the best thing we did. We worked out who owns what on the cluster. So we've got all these workloads running that have been there for kind of 2 years. And organizational structures change, things move, people leave, ownership of things moves around, and keeping track of that's really difficult. So what we did painstakingly, and it took forever, but we worked out who owned the different workloads on the cluster. There's this thing called namespaces in Kubernetes, which are groups of workloads. We tagged onto the actual namespaces the ownership information. We didn't keep it in a spreadsheet anymore or try and keep a document with it in. We put it on the actual cluster. And by using these things called labels, like this metadata stuff, a bit like tags in AWS, we could indicate which tribe this workload belonged to, which squad, and what the Slack channel was, if we ever needed to get hold of them. And that could be updated if the workload ever moved. So that was the source of truth. What proved really useful is when we were trying to do some optimizations around some of the things running on clusters, like our logging pipeline. We had one logging pipeline that took all the logs from the Kubernetes cluster and put them into the Elk stack. If one team got noisy, it would slow down everybody else's logs. So we sharded our log pipelines. We did one per tribe. And the way that the logging pipeline works out where to send the logs is based on the labels that are in the namespace. So it picks up that information and routes the logs according to that. And this has opened up so many other things for us, which I'll cover in a minute. But it means that we've now got ownership information. We can do things like analyze usage and costings and things like that. I'm going to cover training in a bit because it's something which was really important to us and working with the cluster. But we've already got our basic training course. We build an advanced course as well because we realise training is a real sell for the cluster. More on that in a minute. And we are, of course, still working with the engine team some of the time. Some of the team are on call for the cluster, so they need to be as well. We've got the remit to be as involved in the experience or not as we see fit based on what our boss says. So that's the end of year one. So the metrics I'm using for measuring success on this are these usability statements. So I find using X on the cluster easy. I find it complicated, not complicated. Strongly disagree, disagree, that's red. Agree, strongly agree, that's green. More green is good. In 2019, when we got 31 responses for the original questionnaire, that was the response we got. 2020, we've got 25 responses this time, not quite so many. And things are pretty much the same. Some things have gone forward, some things have gone backwards. It's a little bit better if you analyse the numbers, but of course it's stats and you can analyse the numbers any way you flipping like and make your own story from them. So it's going okay. And then into 2020, 2021, we go again. Now, what we're doing this time is we are changing the tact of our approach. So rather than going along the lines of, we're here to help, how can we help you? What do you need from us? How can we make your experience better of using our cluster? We're starting to change the tact to, how can we all make using the cluster better? How can we all make this thing good? And what that means is we start trying to bring in some sort of best practice, which I know is a terrible word and probably hated, but we bring in some standards about how things should be built, deployed, and run onto the cluster. Now, we come up with 60 different rules across those three areas, but we didn't write them. We worked with the teams that use our cluster, the people in the meetings, the people who are raising the FAQ tickets. We work with them to come up with what they think good looks like, and we get buy-in and we get sign-off from them. So we've got 60 best practice rules now, and it turns out that actually we can codify some of them. So rather than just relying on goodwill that people are following these rules, we can actually run checks. So Lydia, who's on the grad scheme, part of her grad work is to build a thing. The thing she builds is she builds these checks, 20 of the checks into the cluster using something called Open Policy Agent, for those of you who like Kubernetes. And that will check the state of all the workloads of the cluster as to whether they comply with those 20 rules. We can then scrape those metrics off the status information of those rules and stick them in the metrics database. And then we can build dashboards off it. So we can build a dashboard that breaks down by tribe, squad, or even individual workload, how compliant workloads are with those rules. And we've classified those rules as well as Moscow. So we've got must, should, and could. That means that we've got severity rating as well. So, you know, some things that really, really, really must be more important than others. And we could flag that on the dashboard as well. So we've got metrics about the state and the quality of stuff running on the cluster. Next thing, we do costs, because everybody loves an AWS bill. And we, again, taking that ownership information, which also we've used in that compliance check to work out who owns what and what state they're in. We're doing that to take the usage metrics of the stuff running on the cluster, exporting out the cost information and pulling a report together of how much your gas bill is for running things on the cluster. Now, this is great. We haven't had this before, but it's retrospective. It's only run at the end of the month and it shows the previous month. It's not real time. So it's great. We've at least got some metrics. And we start bringing those metrics into our meetings. So in addition to the actions from last time, updates from IPE, updates from yourself, feedback, agree on action points for next time, we start looking at the metrics. And we're starting to have conversations here about information and data rather than opinion. And we're getting to the point where we could start thinking about these compliance metrics or cost levels as service level indicators, service level objectives, or even service level agreements. I mean, we could actually, with the compliance stuff, make the rule enforcing, so you wouldn't actually be able to deploy a workload that didn't pass the tests. We don't do that because we are gardening, we are not policing, we are trying to encourage this collaboration. We are not trying to be the police on this. Other things we did was our documentation. It was a mess. We sorted it out. We moved it by product, by user and by maintainer. We split the entire documentation tree up, we removed the duplicate stuff, and we completely restructured it. We're still working on that today. We have a part of our weekly planning meeting, we review the docs and what still is outstanding to do. I did the audit in August. There's 534 docs in there. Nearly all of them are sorted out now, but there's still holes. So we've still got some work to do on that. Other things we do is we build another training course. We realise that people that don't spend all day working building things want to know how the cluster works. So this is things like ADLs, service people, engineering managers. We put together a course which doesn't require you to spend 2 days of your life elbow deep in YAML, learning how Kubernetes or building Kubernetes stuff, so that there's some idea of what Kubernetes work does and what it does at SPG. And of course, we can still work on the engine stuff, as I alluded to before. So these are the results for July 21. We get 30 responses actually, so 31, 25, 30. You can see the red's less, the green's increasing. We're making real progress now. Stuff's starting to happen. So, I mean, again, these are stats. You can fold them and twist them any way you like. But I think things are getting better, and that's what we're going with. So we're continuing with this journey. Okay, into last year, 2021-22. And we start taking the things we've done with the metrics a little bit more seriously. We realise that when we're talking to teams about metrics and asking them to do something about it, if that metrics report is only produced once a month and is retrospective, trying to shift that responsibility left and not giving the suitable tooling and support to do that, all you're doing is like shifting a problem. You're not actually shifting left. So with the cost, for example, what we did was we built a near real-time cost dashboard. The way it works, for those of you that know AWS, there's something called the cost usage reports. We pull that data out and we stick it in a metric store on the cluster. We pull the usage metrics, stick them in the cluster. And it gives us near real time, like the metrics are 24 hours out of date, but that's just because of the way the AWS does its stats. Our usage numbers are up to date. But we've got a dashboard. Again, you can split that by tribe, squad, workload, and you can see how much your stuff costs within a certain time period. And the great thing about this is the dashboard system which many of the devs use to build their own dashboards. So the metrics are available to them in their dashboards, and they could start incorporating that into their dashboards. I don't know if anybody's done that, but what we discovered, unbeknownst to us, was another team have a bot that runs in their ops channel overnight, and it reports current incident reports, if there's been any outages or failures of stuff. It shows their work in progress, and they also put the compliance checks out of our stuff into their report. We didn't even know they'd done this. This was like a massive hooray when we saw this. And there's a link to the dashboard there so they can see their compliance checks as well. Training, I've alluded to this, but I've not gone into too many of the details. The training is super important. It's probably the main reason that we've had such high adoption levels on the cluster. Now, we've been doing this even before customer experience, but we have 2 one-day workshops. The first one is build a Kubernetes app from scratch. Yes, you write YAML for a day. And you build an application and you run it on your laptop. So that gives you some idea of how to build and structure an application. The advanced training, another day workshop. We give you an application. We give you access to the test cluster. We teach you how to deploy that application, add logging, add monitoring, add load balancing, do some performance testing on it. And by the time you've done those 2 courses, you should be proficient enough to go out and build applications and run them on our clusters without causing us too many problems. That's the objective of that. And then I've already alluded to the other course, which is intended for people that aren't necessarily going to be wanting to spend 2 days of their life learning YAML, but actually want to know what Kubernetes does, how it works, and what it does at SPG and why we use it. So that's aimed predominantly at like ADLs, service people, engineering managers, and architects. So the first half of it's kind of a little bit high level. The second half of it's more in depth into the technical stuff. And so far, in the 4 years we've been doing that, we've had 507 people do our courses. Admittedly, that could be the same person doing more than one course, so you could argue it's nearer 200 people, but they may have done each of the courses. But yeah, 507 people being through, that's nearly 3,000 hours of training. And I've done most of it. I like doing the training. It's just as well, isn't it? And we do a survey afterwards, and the feedback we get is really positive. Net Promoter Score somewhere between 90 and 98%, depending upon which course it is. People like our training. And I think what it does is it really engages people with the platform and gets them to want to use it, and now to use it, and lowers that barrier to entry, and facilitates them not having to go and learn this stuff themselves. Okay, so July stats, 2020. We've only had 20 responses. I've done a lot of pushing. You have to do a lot of pushing with this. Don't know why the numbers are so low this year, but the numbers are incredibly positive. As I say, these are stats. You can, weight these, fold these, make these, tell whichever story you want. I think everything's going pretty cool, to be honest, based on that. So, takeaways. How are we doing? Perfect. That's a summary of things we've done. As you can see, we've done quite a lot. You'll see we've done kind of less and less over each year. We've had some people leave the team. I'm kind of now doing this pretty much on my own all the time. But that's cool because we've already put all the foundations in place and all the stuffs and structure and methods are in place to do that. And not wanting to say we're visionaries, but we're seeing this increasingly mentioned, this idea of doing developer experience, developer advocacy, DevRel, whatever you want to call it. Internally within organizations, it was on the ThoughtWorks radar, which Chris alluded to earlier, and Team Topologies, another plug for Conflux, but it is an amazing book, but that mentions that as quite a serious thing to be doing inside your organization in order to get engagement and adoption of services and support. Any patterns though. So we've had some success with this, and I've seen teams try and copy it, but try and do it on the cheap. So these are some of the things we've heard about doing it on the cheap. And what I would hate you to do is take away kind of some of the lessons learned and do it badly and do the wrong thing badly, wrong thing well. That would be worse than not doing anything at all. So these are kind of like the anti-patterns I've seen. So we'll give this a try. Well, I've been given it as a job. So that's different to somebody just doing it as a side project. The company's invested in doing this, and that's why I do this all day, every day. We'll email a survey round, a couple of questions. We'll get some responses. Boom, we've analysed our customer base. Well done, us. I don't think you have at that point. This is one of my favourites. We should probably meet people, but instead what we'll do is we'll create a Slack channel. That is not customer engagement. Just because you have created a mechanism for people to talk to you doesn't mean people are talking to you or you're talking to them. We do the meetings, we go out, we engage. Training. People don't necessarily like doing training or giving training or writing training. Instead, we've seen teams do screen recordings, and that's great. They are producing material. But when you make a screen recording or a series of them, if things change or need updating, you've almost got to do the thing again. Working with video and updating it is really tricky, and making good video is incredibly tricky. And if they're buried inside of the document tree and not promoted, they just sit there and kind of like wither and die. We've got streaming, like view counts and things. We've got those on some of our documents, and I've seen like training courses where they've got 30 views for the first video and then 25 for the second and then 15, and it kind of tails off, and the numbers never go up because it's kind of out of date and old. Standards, I've seen, don't do this, right? I've seen teams write what the standards are, particularly in InfoSec, measure teams that didn't even know about the rules against those, and then email the teams to tell them how badly they're doing. CCing in senior people in an effort to demonstrate they're doing stuff where those senior people have then gone, my opportunity to put people on the naughty step. That is really bad, and that will destroy any engagement or credibility you've got with your customers. Do not do that, but I have seen it happen. And this one winds me up properly. Our customers don't know what they want. We know what they need. We're the experts. And it's like, how do you know if you've not spoken to them? How do you know what people need your stuff for if you're not talking to them? And they say, well, you see, the thing is, we've tried everything. It's just a waste of time. Well, 2 slides ago, I put a list of stuff and some numbers on the screen that shows it works. Maybe they should try that, maybe. Okay, so things I have learnt from this. And I think this relates closely to that last thing. I think if you are in a team that's providing a product or a service and you see your customers as a problem, this isn't going to work for you. You need to get over that, and you need to start thinking about your customers as someone to work with and not an inconvenience. I have been astounded by the help and the enthusiasm that everybody I've spoken to at Sky Bet, when we approached them about doing this, from engineering managers, heads of tech, all the way down to the actual engineers. Everyone's super positive when you know you're trying to make their life easier. It's hard to do though, maintain momentum, keeping this going. Sometimes we get really low show at the meetings, sometimes we get a lot of people. Writing up the minutes is a chore. I don't enjoy doing it, but I do it because it's important to have that visibility of what was spoken about there. Maintaining a team's hard. This is a weird job, right? Being technical and being kind of like administrative at the same time isn't what everybody wants to do. And finding people that want to do that is, tricky to say the least. But I find if you are genuine and you're professional and you're not doing the sales thing and you're not trying to do a spin doctory thing, people react really well to you. And there's that old adage that computers are hard and people are harder. I found people actually all right doing this. Maybe I've just been lucky, but I don't think they are that hard if you're, doing something that's going to make life easier. Right, wrap up from me. I showed this slide at the beginning when I was talking about things you could take away. Like I say, you are not a bunch of platform engineers running Kubernetes clusters. But the point is, if you are using or consuming services, using some of these ideas and working together and collaborating, and a lot of things Chris talked about with his stuff about value streams and Wardley mapping and stuff like that. If you engage and you work with teams, you're going to have a much better time at work. I think that's the important thing. And with that, I think it's time for lunch. So thanks very much.